Oh, you do have people in the room, in the auditorium? Well, anyway, this is really great. Quality matters. That's what we always say. So we've been speaking for 2.5 days a lot about fact checking. Today we spoke about conflicts, manipulation, and how things could be influenced. And the last point we haven't covered yet is elections. Between 2023 and 2024, some 20 countries will have elections, presidential elections, or governmental or federal, legislative elections and the like. So we thought it was a good idea to cover this issue about 20 countries in the African continent. To close these 3 days, to my left, I have Owel Opti, who is a researcher and community manager for Africa Check in Nigeria. And to my right, I have Valdez, chief editor in chief of Africa Check. Thank you, in Dakar. For those of you who are not familiar with Africa Check, it was founded in 2012 in Nigeria by the former head of AFP in Nigeria, but he founded it in South Africa. The French version started in 2015. Overall, they're more mature in fact checking in Anglo Saxon countries than in French speaking countries in the African continent. And that is why we will start with Allwell, who will tell us about the system that has been set up for fact checking elections held in February for the presidential elections and in March for the federal elections, bearing in mind that Nigeria was targeted in 2015, and of course, the expected problems with fake news. Can you tell us more and explain what was the system that you set up?
All right, thank you very much. Leading to the 2023 elections, yeah, we had the federal elections in February and then the state elections in March. It was obvious that disinformation was going to be a major issue in the election. I mean, considering how it was obvious that the election was going to be keenly contested because of the leading candidates from different parts of the country and the narratives around those candidates and the party, and also with the issue with the leading ruling party at the time. So we had to prepare to tackle the kind of information that was going to be shared around that election. So we began with even training journalists, training student journalists. We got involved in about a dozen trainings like that. Some of them, some organization invited us to train their journalists. And then we did an analysis of the entire election to see, who are the actors, what are the issues, what are the narratives around those candidates, and where are the gaps in information available to the public, and where are the areas where misinformation is likely to come up, and we're able to put all of those out and map them out clearly to know what areas to monitor, whether on social media, on outside social media. And then we did publish a number of analysis to just put a whole lot of things in context, to really let people know what the issues that were going to be coming up, and then providing certain information ahead of time so that when they begin to, and the false information begin to circulate, it will be, people will already be armed to know that, okay, we were warned about this, right? We looked at trends around this information that we're already seeing, and also preempting what we're going to see closer to the election, even on election day. We did publish on election eve, the kind of misinformation you are likely to see on election day.
Donc ça, c'est tout le travail de préparation.
So that's the work done in preparing ahead of time. Is there anything that surprised you? Anything you were not prepared for that you did not anticipate?
Oh, we did our analysis did cover quite a lot, but I'll say probably we didn't underestimated the intensity of the disinformation, and then also probably in the area of the extent to which public figures, I mean top politicians, got involved in actively sharing false information.
Et qu'est-ce- Ouais,
So, this intensity, fine. But what was special about the context? What were the differences with previous elections? I know that the ethnic issue was at the heart of disinformation. Could you give us an example of something that was particularly crucial in the campaign?
For this election, obviously, yeah, ethnicity was a major issue, and then religion. I mean, those two have always been major issues in our elections. But this was a bit peculiar because we had the ruling party, having bringing out Muslim both for presidential and the running mate, and that became a major issue around the election. And so we had out of the four leading candidates, three were Muslims and one Christian, and so you saw a whole lot of casting of this candidate say, oh, this is a Christian candidate. And so if you understand how Nigeria is, the North is predominantly Muslim and the South is predominantly Christian. And so when they create those narratives around, say, oh, he's a Christian candidate, and so, he will be anti-North. And all this kind of, so narrative was one thing that was different from the previous election. I mean, at least 2019, the two leading candidates were Muslim, so we didn't have the issue of Christian Muslim as were. And then also probably there was also the element of the use of AI. Some videos that were manipulated with AI apps and all that were something that we saw this time that we didn't see in the previous elections.
Alors justement, quel a été le
And what role did Africa Check play? What role did Africa Check play in this precise example? And how did you deal with it? And deal with the fake information and the use of AI with respect to the video in question?
All right, for a lot of those, I mean, like has been said even in the last session, I mean, the handling those kind of videos is still quite tricky. Some of them, what really helped is to really look at the context and see, the person, because there were mainly issues around videos either manipulated to make it seem a candidate said something that he shouldn't say, or some prominent persons endorsing some candidates. I mean, we had videos of Elon Musk endorsing one of the candidates in the election. I mean, very prominent. I mean, there was even another one that, I mean, over 2 dozens of Hollywood stars endorsing one of the candidates, Peter Obi, and it was just a manipulation of video. So the first thing is to really see how is it even possible for these people to endorse a candidate in the Nigerian election, and has there been any kind of relationship whatsoever between this candidate and this actors or celebrities, and then going from that, and of course, if anyone is going to endorse a candidate like that, it wouldn't just be some random video. It will be somewhere in their handle, somewhere. So those are some of the ways we were able to look at those videos, and then just observing them carefully, you will notice that some things are not right, and you were able to point out that okay, a normal video wouldn't play like this. I mean, there are the way it's all disjointed.
For Senegal, elections will be next February, Valdez, and you are now preparing for the next campaign. If I understand correctly, you're not in the middle of it yet, but you're anticipating. But based on what happened in Nigeria, what tools will you reuse, or what will you develop? If I understand correctly, you were too few for the last elections to really carry out any major fact checking actions. So, what have you set up? With my team in Dakar, we've been trying to deal with the upcoming elections based on two cases. The last presidential elections in Senegal in 2019, where, as you said, we're not yet a big team as we are today. How many are you? A team of 5 people, in addition to two permanent members of staff, and we're trying to focus as far as possible on contributors from outside of Senegal. Based on our elections, therefore, in 2019 and our experience of those elections, I believe that, well, we were not sufficiently well prepared for an event like that. There was a proliferation of fake news circulating through that period, and it was obvious that it was impossible for us as a small team to be able to cover these presidential elections on our own, or at least cover the disinformation during the presidential elections. We learned that we needed to work together with other journalists so as to be able to carry out more fact checking during the elections. The second thing that we're using is the great experience of our colleagues in Nigeria. In my opinion, once again, they have set up a very relevant mechanism to cope with the challenges of dealing with the presidential elections in Nigeria. It was well structured. They worked at an early stage because you have to start early for the presidential elections. As Orwell said, they had to explain all the narratives around the main protagonists in the elections. And for me, that is very important because you need to set the context so that the public can fully understand what's at stake and to have a more critical eye about the elections. Because fact checking the elections isn't just drawing up articles on fact checking, but you have to work on it ahead of time. And then fact checking must be done in synergy. We're 5 or 7 of us. Believe you me, that's insufficient during the elections because disinformation moves swiftly. The time it takes to respond must be shorter because everything goes very quickly. It's in a short time frame, very often 2 months or 40 days. So you must be as responsive as possible. And that means that you need to have many people to be able to do that. So you must federate around Africa Check other journalists, freelance journalists from an editorial standpoint, independent, who can work with us on the elections, but not just journalists, because covering elections also means relying on people following trends on social media and who can report to us any fake news circulating that we overlooked. So, a lot of skills that you need to look for to ensure efficient coverage of fake news during the elections, and we're still working on it. Okay, so this is in progress. So, Allwell, could you tell us how you worked on collaborative fact checking, which seems to be one of the keys for success for good fact checking for the elections?
All right. Really, would say much of our success around this election was the collaboration that we had with other fact checkers in Nigeria. I mean, say about almost a year to the February election, the discussion around collaborating among fact checkers began, and then it went on quite well, and then I think as of the election day we had about 12 organizations involved in that, and on election day when we had our situation room in Abuja and Lagos, and I think we had a total of over 30 fact checkers and social media guys.
Pendant ça, en amont de
And that was before the elections. That was before the elections.
Before the election, of course, we did quite a lot. We had a conference around this information leading to the election, and then we did a number of fact-checking debates at town hall meetings where candidates came and spoke, both for presidential and the governorship elections, and then in those in any of those town hall days, we did live fact checking, and that was obviously possible because of the fact checkers from other organizations. We had other organizations who had experience in doing live fact checking, and that was one beautiful thing about the coalition. We're able to harness all of the skills that we have across board, and all of the experience, and so it did work out. We did a few live fact checking sessions during debates, and then of course in most cases after the debate we then do more in-depth fact checking on those things, because there's just so much you can do when you're try to keep up with time during the debate, but you might not be able to add all of the context and all that to probably explain your verdict, right?
Sorry to interrupt. Je voudrais
I would like to come back, Valdez, to what Aldwell is saying. When we spoke, your position was a bit doubtful about live fact checking, mainly because you said that that called for a larger group. Now, you were quite critical about what some French media could do in live fact checking. Can you tell us more? Are you selling me to the media? Are you looking for a job here? No, I'm not. No. The reason why I was, or I am, and still am dubious about this is only linked to access to data. When you look at live fact checking during the last presidential elections in France, I saw that there were limits in the answers provided, because once again, fact checking is not just saying it's true or false. The context is key when it comes to fact checking. People must understand the context of information to understand. To say that it's true or false, well, you have the context behind it that allows you to better apprehend what's going on. As always said, we're often limited by time. We don't always have time to go out and look for the most precise information and to put it in context and to have it interpreted based on independent expertise. So that too is important. It is true that it's all fine and good to promote, how do I call this, live fact checking, but I think that we need more tools. And in Senegal, for example, it's not to be pessimistic, but it could be a major challenge that we can't overcome right now in 2024. As I said before, access to data is a major challenge we are facing. I would like to respond to that straight away. But the important thing in what Aldwell was saying was that after live fact checking is the ability to go further in your search and to publish something with external testimonials. Isn't that it?
To probably add expert comments where it's necessary, and then look at sometimes when you're done with live fact checking and you look at some of the claims that you checked in and you might realize that was there are certain contexts that were missing, and so that's the live fact checking is challenging, right? You can really just be able to succeed with it if you have checked those things before. I mean, if a politician make a claim that you have checked before, then that's easy to just say, oh no, that's not correct. We've checked it before, or something that is essentially just about the statistics, and you're able to quickly have access to the data, and then you can correct just the number. But then beyond the number, there's always all of the context around it. So just doing that. Further in-depth report, helps to put all of those things in properly in context.
Alors, je rebondis également.
I'd like to come back to what Valdez said. One of the challenges is also access to data. And we know that it's not specifically for elections, but I know that each time I've heard panel discussions on journalism in Africa, it's always about access to data, access to data. How did things go during the elections, and how did you manage to get access to data?
Well, I mean, access to data is it's a big issue, and well, probably will be for quite some time, especially in Africa. But one of the things that we do, especially when we train journalists, we say, because they are the ones, say a TV presenter or a journalist that will had interviews with politicians directly. One of the things that we usually tell them is, if a politician makes a claim, right there, maybe live TV, one of the things that you can do is to ask him, how do you know this? What's your evidence? But what we find a lot of times, they make the claim and they go away, and then we fact checkers come to them, ask them, okay, oh, how did you? Where was your evidence for this claim that you made? We are checking it, and I'll say almost all the time they don't respond. Because I mean that's sort of our process. We'll email the person or try to call their office to say, oh, this politician made this claim, and we saw it in the newspaper or we saw it in a TV interview, and we are checking this claim and that claim and that claim. A lot of the times they don't respond.
Ouais, bah, alors, je suis désolée, mais
I'm sorry, but it is a bit worrying because I'm so sorry for the organizers at CFI. We have spoken so much about fact checking, but if you get no answers, what's the point of fact checking during the elections if the candidates don't even reply?
Well, I mean, they are not replying doesn't necessarily mean that you won't do your fact check, right? But of course, in our report, we always stated very clearly that we did reach out, and we haven't gotten a response. But then you then go out to speak to experts in the areas that about that claim, and look at every possible data that could give you an idea of what it is. And, triangulate your data, use every data point that you can find to say, okay, this is this is that, this is that. Even though it probably doesn't directly answer the question, but you present all of the data that you have, and then speak to experts who are quite knowledgeable about that issue. At least you have an idea of what what it could be, even though you haven't gotten an official response from the agency that is supposed to ideally have that on their website, right? And then so that's sort of how we try to manage those issues around non-availability of data.
alors, Valdez, est-ce que tu peux rebondir?
Could you comment on this, the issue of access to information? But in our exchange, we saw that not many studies have been conducted on the issue, but maybe we could have a look at what the impact is on the audience, and is it your target when you do this fact-checking activity during elections? It's true that there are not many studies on the impact of fact-checking. I think actually that's the case in the Francophone and Anglophone regions in Africa. But I think it is a necessary exercise, and even more so during electoral periods of times, because that's also a way of preparing the audience to two things: to the fact that disinformation can have an impact on the decisions that are made. Disinformation is often used by the different candidates either to make their actions look better, or it can create tensions, or it can have an impact on someone's choice. So people need to understand that. Second thing, talking about the fact that we do fact-checking during electoral periods, it is important because it highlights the fact that the speeches made during electoral campaigns are going to be analyzed in depth. Hassan Diane is the editor-in-chief of the Francophone Office of Africa Check, and we had checked the Minister of Economy's declaration several times at the time, and the communication manager said, "I'm going to stop using figures in the minister's speech because you're always checking them." And that's a good thing, in my opinion, because instead of sharing false figures, then it's better not to include them. That's the kind of impact that what we do have, because we live in a country where there's no real accountability culture. People think that they can say anything they want because they're a figure of authority. It's important that people know journalists are working and making sure that the public debate and political competition takes place with fact-based information. And that's how we can assess the impact of a fact-checking project during electoral times. In your opinion, is this the same thing? Would you have examples that you could provide on the work done upstream and the fact that politicians knew there were going to be fact-checked? Did this change their behaviors? Do you have concrete examples?
Well, first of all, when the campaigns began in February, no, sorry, September 2022, we as a coalition we did an open letter to politicians, and we said, oh, we're going to be checking you, so be careful what you say and all that, and sort of just try to tell them that, look, what you say, the spirit is going to be important, and posterity and all of that, and so we sort of put them on notice. But then part of what we saw.
À cette étape-là, est-ce qu'il y a eu des...
And at that stage, were there reactions from the politicians?
Yeah, so what we noticed is that a lot of the politicians that came on TV for interviews, they themselves made fact checking an issue in the election, because you always hear them say, "Oh, I know you're fact checking me," and then some will say, "In fact, fact check me. I know what I'm saying is correct," and all that. So it was obvious that they were aware that there were fact checkers, looking at everything that they said, and especially during the debates, that they had that consciousness, and sometimes they even sort of tried to debate certain fact checks, right? And then another thing that we know, especially on social media, is that when you fact check the leading party, the opposition will take it and then use it as a weapon, and then yeah, he lied, he gave wrong information, and when you fact check the other side, same thing. So we saw that the different campaigns were amplifying fact checks because they felt, oh, okay, it affected the other camp. And so generally we saw that fact checking was an issue around this election generally. And then on for us, we also got quite a number of feedbacks on Twitter and especially on WhatsApp, because we have about 16,000 subscribers on WhatsApp, and that's Africa Check office in Nigeria, and we do push out some of the fact checks around the elections, to the subscribers, and almost every time we get positive feedback, people saying, okay, we thank you for this. I've shared it with my friends. I was arguing with somebody about this, just yesterday. Thank you. I'm going to share it with the person, and those are the kind of feedback that we got, and we believe that's the extent to which there was an impact.
Et du coup, est-ce
And so you were saying that you were quite surprised by the number of fake news that circulated, and the fact that you warn politicians upstream beforehand, the fact that they were vigilant. Did you see that there were less fake news that were circulated in political speeches, and then the fake news were coming from other people than politicians?
I'll say that the bigger issue wasn't even the politicians themselves, because we can say that a lot of them were careful, especially the candidates and all that. But the issue are their supporters, especially on social media. There are all of this obvious, coordinated attempts to push certain narratives because they know that such narratives will, make the other candidate lose votes, particularly in some parts of the country. And so because of how diverse Nigeria is, certain kind of disinformation were targeted at certain ethnic groups, certain religious groups, certain regions, because, there's that suspicion that, oh, this candidate, probably his leaning is on this side, and so he might not be favorable to my region. And so we saw a whole lot of narratives that were pushed just to push that mistrust a lot further. And so it was more of their supporters, and not really. Obviously, the politicians, the candidates did make some false claims, but then I think the bigger issue was with their supporters. Even campaign spokespersons were real actors in pushing this information around the election.
Valdez, alors,
Valdez, apart from politicians, one of your targets is journalists. You want to make sure that media content is fact checked. Can you tell us about the work that you do in terms of training journalists, raising awareness amongst them? Yes, indeed. As I was saying during the first round table, I participated to the day before yesterday. One of Africa Check's missions is to promote this practice on the African continent, and that is done also through training. And we work with different partners at Africa Check, and we organize training sessions for journalists. Recently, we organized a session in DRC. We trained journalists to fact-checking, journalists and civil society members. That was done in the context of disinformation in Kivu and the crisis that is taking place there. We're working also in Senegal with Disinfox Africa. We are working with 4 local media outlets and the journalists are trained to fact-checking. Not only that, but also everything that entails the work of fact-checking, because the idea is not only that they then produce fact-checking systems, but more that journalists then take this into account in their daily work, in their editorial work. That's the main goal. And I think that if we can create a space in the media where media outlets are aware of how important fact-checking is, more particularly during electoral times, the elections in our countries are going to be better covered. There will be less disinformation. If we create synergies, then that means that everything will be aligned, and it will be more difficult for people who practice disinformation, especially in electoral times, to do that. As we said, we've seen it in Nigeria when they published this open letter to the candidates saying that they were going to do fact-checking during the electoral times. The consequence was that there were less false declarations. But there's another challenge, of course, that the audience, the supporters of these candidates are practicing disinformation a lot, and we've seen it in Senegal during the 2019 elections. Lots of fake news were coming from the social networks. So if we can create a media space where our media outlets become aware of how important fact-checking is in their work, then I think it will be even easier to counter disinformation. Before we start taking questions from the audience, could you summarize in a very concise way some key steps for an effective fact-checking? So when you're targeting large mainstream audience, journalists, Orwell can start. Well, you can give one advice, you can give another one, and then we continue with the room. You can start, Orwell. What would be the first thing, and maybe we haven't mentioned it yet, regarding the audience? I think you know that something that's important for you so that it's meaningful.
One of the things that we also explored in this around this election was, putting out fact checks in local languages, right? Because we also noticed that some of the misinformation also were in local languages, in videos, and circulated on platforms like WhatsApp, and so we I had to interpret some of the fact checks that we do in English into the major languages, and then try to see how we can target groups, WhatsApp groups, where some of the speakers of this language sort of congregate. So it's something that I advise, especially if your country is like Nigeria, where there are so many different ethnic groups and so many different languages. Not everyone will probably be very comfortable to communicate in the official language. So and that was helpful, and I'll advise that any day.
Vous l'avez envisagé?
Have you considered this, to publish your fact-checking work in different languages? It's another project that I can't reveal everything now, but yes, a very good idea to do it in the local languages, and we've done it during the COVID-19 crisis. We were sending voice notes in WhatsApp in Wolof, which is the most spoken language in Senegal, and we had really great feedback. So yes, that's an idea that is really important when you publish fact checks. The fact that coalitions are created, that's very important. I'd like to add that, because it's a way of polarizing the work. So when you publish an article, then it's published at the same time by all the media outlets that are part of the coalition, so it creates a type of storm. a storm around fake news. So that's very important that these initiatives are in place and that they're well coordinated so that the impact is more perceived. So working in local languages, working in synergies, in coalitions, collaborations. A third one, third advice, important.
This has also been mentioned, which is really understanding the context, the history of the country and the history of elections, the issues around whether it's ethnicity or religion, around the country and the candidates involved, right? So it's really helpful because sometimes something that you might see information and it might not make sense to people from a certain part of the country, but then it's a big deal in another part. I don't know if I have time to give the example of one check that we did. It was a simple photo, right, of one of the candidates. I mean, the Christian candidate, right? So it was a photoshopped. It was sort of put in a photo where it looked like he was drinking beer, and the beer brand he was drinking in that photo supposedly is called Hero, and it has this logo of a rising sun. Now, just looking at that, you might not understand why that is a big issue, right? The person that put that out is an influencer from northern Nigeria, and all of his posts are sort of pro-North, and he's a Muslim. Now, in the northern Nigeria, drinking alcohol is haram, right? It's so a typical northern Muslim will not like you if you're an alcoholic, right? And so number one, he was trying to cast that candidate as an alcoholic, and then number two, because of the logo of the brand of beer, which is similar to the logo of Biafra, which is the candidate's region in southeast Nigeria. Biafra is the region that broke out of Nigeria in 1967, which led to the Civil War. And so, there's still that suspicion people from the southeast, like, oh, do they still want to be in Nigeria or they want out? And so there is that. He was also sort of branded as a pro-Biafra candidate. And so those are two narratives that a typical northern Muslim will not like. I mean, it will be a no-no, right? So if you don't have this understanding, you will not understand why you should even check that in the first place. You probably just say, oh, it was photoshopped and, oh, it is false, and that's it. But then you will have missed the point.
Merci.
Et après,
Thank you. And now that we know that we need to study the context and understand the history, maybe there are questions in the room. Thank you very much to the panel for these really rich experiences that they shared with us. I'm Olivier Ribuist. I come from Benin. I work for a fact-checking organization called Benin Check Info, and we also have some experience in electoral fact-checking. In 2021, we launched a similar type of initiative, and Valdez actually came and organized a workshop, and we wanted to mobilize colleagues who work in newsrooms, in community-based radio, in media outlets that are here and there in the country, because we're based in Cotonou, and in Benin there are 117 communes, and in those parts of the country, we mobilize people that we train on fact-checking, and they helped us during the electoral period with this fact-checking work, and that was really useful to check information where there's not much access. One of our challenges that we had to face is that at some point one of our colleagues felt threatened. We fact-checked a rumor that circulated and that announced that attacks were going to be led in regions that belong to an opponent. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. And that leads me to a question to all. Well, in your case in Nigeria, have you had to face situations where your colleagues saw that they were threatened, they felt threatened? Because electoral times are full of tension, and I'd also like to ask Valdez about the next elections in Senegal. Are they taking measures regarding the safety of journalists? And I'd like to ask you both what challenges you had to face in the past and how did you overcome these challenges? Thank you. Who wants to start?
Regarding threats, well, this particular election, we had issues where where there was a lot of attack on social media, right? People that weren't happy with certain fact checks, where they try to accuse us of all manner of things, and I mean the abuse on social media was something that we had a few times, but in terms of threat to life, I wouldn't say we quite had that in this election. Probably because of the coalition, right? It helped, the sort of, have the attention. So it's not just us, right? We are many. So you're probably not going to be threatening all of us at the same time. So I think that's one also one advantage of the coalition. But then, of course, in the course of our work, we have the instances where we actually threaten. I've been threatened, like even from my region of the country, and all that. So that happens, and of course, it's the same thing. As much as possible, do your work as professionally as you can, and so that nobody can legitimately accuse you of being biased, and then of course keep safe as much as you can, right? You shouldn't risk your life unnecessarily, really. Yeah, I think that's the question.
Oui, sur la disposition, la disposition en matière de sécurité, ça, on le fait toujours.
Yes, measures, security measures, we always implement them, and my colleague who's in the room always reminds us of the fact that we shouldn't take unnecessary risks. We try not to be heroes. We don't want to pretend we're heroes. We're just journalists. We process information, so we try and be careful. And I agree with what Always said. One of the advantages of the coalition is this one in particular. It gives you more impact. It gives you your stronger voice regarding the challenges that we have to face. Well, they're the same ones in 2019 when you fact check at midday something about a candidate. You've got all the supporters who are commenting it and insulting you and saying you're corrupt. We've seen it all. And in the evening, when you fact check another candidate, then the same ones who insulted you in the morning are then more moderate. So in Dakar, there were tricky times. And then we gained maturity after the election, and we became more legitimate as well, because when you cover disinformation in electoral times, if you work well, if you comply with fact-checking principles and the IFCN's principles, then in the longer term, it strengthens your credibility with the audience because they realize that they fact-check one candidate in the morning, another in the evening, another one the day after, so there's no bias the way we thought beforehand. So if you do it well, it can really strengthen your credibility after the election. So that's always the challenge. You're constantly being criticized. If someone doesn't agree with the conclusion of an article, even if you've got all the proofs listed, some people will always have a say. And beyond fact-checking, it's a crisis that journalism has to go through. Thank you. Another question?
Executive Director of VoundCheck Nigeria. For the sake of participants here, I'll be asking 2 questions. I'm very particular about experts in fact-checking, and oftentimes there are some claims you see, especially in Nigeria, and you really need to include expert views. It's part of the whole fact-checking process. At that point, you don't get an expert, or probably the expert that is expected, or that is actually a professional for that particular category or claim, does not respond. For example, in Nigeria, the number of police officers in the country is still unknown. You know, we worked on in a particular report and we had to make it unconfirmed. So if you actually see a claim and you know if you don't debunk this claim, it's going to cause damage, and the experts who are expected to respond do not respond, will you just write your verdict unconfirmed and you'll be confident that your verdict, that particular verdict, has actually done justice to that claim? If not, what else do you do? My second question is, this information and misinformation and other information disorder have a way of spreading so fast. Fake news, there's fake news, it spreads so fast. Now, when you write a fact check, and of course, we know the fact check does not really go as far as the fake news has been spread initially. What initiative do you employ? How do you ensure that your fact check also goes the same wavelength with the fake news that has been spread? Thank you.
Merci. Alors, je pense que la première question sera pour Holwell.
I think that the first question will be for Olwell and the second for Valdez, because the second one was about how fast it goes when there's fake news.
To what I said earlier about, when you're not able to get the data you're looking for, or the agency or official in charge is not willing to provide the information. I mean, it's like we said, it's about the most difficult challenge you have, because there isn't any other way you can find, unless the data exists somewhere and that you can search and eventually find it. So you just have to dig and find whatever evidence you can find that will help to give you an idea of what that is. But then, in terms of just speaking to experts, I think the best thing is really to get as many experts as possible. I mean, one of the things I do is to build that contact list of every expert that I speak to on different issues, and then in terms of practice, we also sort of try to, because we use a lot of academics, right? And so we use this directory of university professors, and that has always come in handy. So I have a number of experts to call. I mean, sometimes I call up to 10 to get one comment.
Et là encore, il y a la...
And once again, here you anticipate, because during election times you have to anticipate a certain number of data. The governments have signed agreements so that there's access to information and it's transparent. I don't know if many media outlets have also pressed charges about that, because it is possible to do that, to have access to data, but anticipation is also a way of having access to this data.
You mean the pressing charges in court to get the government to release
Yep.
information? Well, we we have the law. Then various people have had experiences trying to go through that process. The Freedom of Information Act, sometimes it's still not successful because there is the law, and then there is the practicality of it. Sometimes it's not that straightforward, right? With the way the judiciary is and all that. So sometimes, yeah, there have been people who had success in, compelling government agencies to release certain information, but in the general, even when we have tried it, and the general information I know about that is that a lot of the times it's not very successful.
Et puis après, il y a une question de temps.
And then it's a question of time as well. Valdez, second part?
Revient toujours. Hein, je pense.
I often hear that question. I think there are more lawsuits in fact checking than anywhere else. Talking about the scope of a survey or a documentary, but very often fact checking articles are scrutinized. But that must be accepted so that you can cope with problems that are there on the table. Well, we spoke about working in synergy, publishing, fact checking articles at the same time allows you to give more clout to it. But you also know how to develop these articles on different platforms. Now, these contents and platforms are chosen depending on the target you want to reach. We started to use WhatsApp, for example, because I believe throughout the continent and even in Europe, it is the messaging system that is largely used. A lot of fake information circulate there. You have TikTok that is growing rapidly in Senegal and that we've started to use recently, to look at recently. So you must think more about how to develop this content and scatter it to make it put it in within everyone's reach. Local languages too. Some articles are summarized in a local language and shared with the target audience because not everyone takes the time to read fact-checking articles. So everyone, each one, depending on the context and the target. This is why it is very important in our work to understand your audience. And is it only in writing or do you have short videos? What do you do on TikTok? On TikTok, it's only video. But even by using video, you need to think about what type of video. And that calls for thinking all the time or adjusting because the time factor changes quickly on the social media. We also have a podcast called Fake and Fake. We must really think about diversifying contents and not just only sticking with text articles. Otherwise, it won't reach out as far as you would like it to. Where do we stand, Time Master? Well, we can take a question, and the other workshops will soon come in. I'm from Mauritania, and I have a question for Africa Check. Do you also react on other fake news in other countries, and not only in Senegal or Nigeria or South Africa, but other countries like Mauritania? We don't have fact checkers, but Africa Check, do you sometimes react on topics involving Mauritania? And secondly, It's very delicate. It depends on the context, but it's delicate if the information comes from the government authorities. Recently, you had riots in Mauritania, demonstrations linked to the death of a young person in a police office. And according to a press release, they said that during the demonstration, you had more foreigners than Mauritanians. As a journalist, the idea was to go out to speak with the authorities and to prove that they're foreigners. We can have no proof. We don't have any names or any lists or anything. So it's very difficult. The information was passed on, demonstrations, frustrations. It all fell on the backs of foreigners. And there were prejudices on foreigners. And it's difficult as a journalist to come up with the right information, the real information. What do you do in a case like that? If the authorities themselves give that information and they themselves do fact checking to stop information, they arrested a journalist to say that the information you publish is not true. What we wrote, the official press release, is true. What do you do then? Just to say, with respect to the first question, on Africa Checked, you can be contacted. You, you can send information to you that you can cover or not. Do you restrict yourselves in your answers to the areas that you're familiar with? Or would you reach out to help fact checkers or media outlets in other countries to deal with these concerns? We're a French speaking office, and most of our fact checking that we publish, well, 90%, is on Senegal, where it's based, and that's normal. It's not that we don't want to work on countries like Ivory Coast, Mali, because the same problems we're facing in Senegal are there too. But it's more difficult when you're not on the spot, even if you often worked with correspondents in those countries. So that's the difficulty we're facing. We'd love to be able to cover all of French speaking Africa, but it is still a greater challenge than what we can deal with right now. But in the work that we're doing on the social media, in partnership with Meta, sometimes we can check publications that started in Mauritania, Cote d'Ivoire, or Cameroon, or elsewhere, and that were found in another sphere in Senegal. We can do fact checking on those topics because you know that in the social media, there are no frontiers really. And a topic, a story on a flood in Haiti, may go viral in Senegal, and so on. But with respect to statements made publicly, it's true that it's rare in our job to go beyond the borders of Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, or Guinea, which are mainly the countries where we are established. And with respect to the second part of that question, on what to do, I didn't really get it. I didn't really understand the second question. Fact checking done directly by the government. Well, listen, I feel ill at ease with the idea that a government can do fact checking. It's not up to governments to do fact checking. But yes, it's true that you're in an environment where it's just pressure, really, that is exerted on journalists when you try to impose your proof as a government without giving any evidence. That's the problem. You may say that's the truth, but there's always a simple question that we put, be it with respect to a ministry or a government institution. We ask for just evidence of what you're saying, and we often realize that a lot of things are said. And when you ask for a factual basis on which the statement relies, there's no evidence. So the case you mentioned is a bit complicated, and maybe if you wish, we could talk about it later on at greater length. Okay, thank you to all three of you for that exchange of views.